Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at the intersection of robotics and cardiology.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So we're going to be looking at a research article from Science Robotics, and it's about a new robotic system that can actually study gap junctions.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's even helped researchers define potential treatments for a really dangerous condition called arrhythmogenic cardiomyopathy. ACM.
ACM.
So this is going to be a wild ride into the future of medicine.
I think this is really combining some incredible technology with some really fundamental cell biology to try to, make a difference in people's lives.
Absolutely. So before we get into the robot itself, can you remind us what exactly gap junctions are and why they're so important for the heart?
Sure. So gap junctions are basically like little channels that allow cells to communicate with each other.
Okay.
And so they're found all over the body, but they're particularly important in the heart because they help to synchronize the contractions of all those heart muscle cells and make sure the heartbeat is nice and smooth.
So they all beat at the same time.
Exactly.
Got it.
Uh-huh.
And so when these gap junctions malfunction, that's where ACM comes into play.
Right. So ACM is one of the leading causes of sudden cardiac death in young adults. And often it's because of an inherited genetic mutation.
Okay.
And so the mutation basically disrupts the normal structure of the heart muscle.
Okay.
So you get healthy tissue replaced by scar tissue and fat.
Oh, wow.
But what's interesting is that faulty gap junctions play a role in this too.
Really?
Yeah, because they contribute to the electrical instability in the heart,
I see.
which leads to arrhythmias.
So those are irregular heartbeats.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this robot was designed to study these tiny gap junctions in a way that hasn't been done before. So tell me a little bit about how it works. What's so special about this?
Well, for a long time, studying gap junction function has been really hard because the ways that people did it kind of damaged the cells that they were trying to study.
Right.
But this new system uses something called 3D holographic microscopy.
Okay.
And it basically gives the robot supervision so it can see individual heart cells in 3D and track them while they're beating.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So the robot can actually see the heart cells.
It can. It's amazing.
Wow. And it can track their beating.
Yes. And this is really important.
Okay.
Because the robot actually needs to time its movements with the beating of the heart cell.
To inject it.
Exactly.
Wow. That is amazing. So the robot can see the heart cells and it can feel them too, almost with the beating.
Right.
So what tools does it use to actually manipulate these cells?
So it has a custom-designed Z-shaped micropipette, which allows it to reach cells in standard lab plates.
So it can reach down into those tiny spaces.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow. And inject them.
With incredible accuracy.
So this is really a game changer for research.
I think so.
It sounds like something from a movie.
It does a little bit.
So before they could use this on ACM, they needed to make sure that it actually worked.
Yeah, of course.
So how did they validate the system?
So they did a clever thing where they used drugs that are known to either enhance or inhibit gap junction function.
So they already knew what the drugs would do.
Right.
Okay.
And they tested 3 enhancers and 3 inhibitors,
Uh-huh.
and they found that the robot could very accurately detect the effects of each of the drugs.
Okay, so it passed the test.
Yeah.
Now, how did they use this to study ACM? Because obviously they can't miniaturize this robot and send it into someone's heart, right?
No, they can't do that yet.
So how did they study ACM?
So they basically created a disease model in a dish.
Okay.
So they took healthy heart cells that were growing in the lab, and they used the robot to knock down a specific gene. It's called the PKP2 gene.
PKP2. Isn't that the gene that you're saying is often mutated in people with ACM?
Yeah. Exactly.
Wow.
So by knocking down this gene, they basically recreated the genetic defect that you see in the patients.
Oh. So they created a little miniature version of ACM in the lab.
Right, in the lab.
Wow. So they could study the disease that way.
Exactly.
So what did they observe in these cells after they knocked down the PKP2 gene? Did it actually look like the disease?
Yeah. The results were really striking.
What did they find? Tell me.
So they found that the heart cells with the knocked down PKP2 gene had really weak contractions, just like you see in the diseased heart muscle.
Okay.
And they also observed that there was less dye transfer between the cells, which is a good sign that those gap junction connections are not working as well as they should be.
Oh, so they basically recreated the disease in a dish.
Pretty much. Yeah.
That's incredible. So now they have this perfect setup to test potential treatments. Did they use the robot for that as well?
They did, and this is where it gets really interesting. fascinating.
Okay, tell me about it.
So they use the robotic system to test a whole library of 76 different drugs
76
on this ACM cell model. Wow. Okay.
And they were looking for anything that could improve the gap junction function.
That must have taken forever.
It would have taken a very long time if they had done it manually.
Right.
But the robot really sped up the process.
Okay. And out of those 76 drugs, did they find anything?
They did.
Yeah.
Actually, they found 5 compounds that significantly boosted gap junction function.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Okay, tell me about these compounds. Were they all brand new drugs designed for ACM?
Well, that's the interesting part.
Okay.
Some of them were already used for other things,
Really?
but no one had ever looked to see if they affected gap junctions before.
Huh.
For example, talazomide is actually a drug for treating type 2 diabetes,
Wow.
and flecainide is used to treat arrhythmias.
So they already had a purpose?
Right, but the fact that they also affect gap junctions and potentially ACM was a brand new discovery.
That is so cool. Science is amazing. You never know where the next breakthrough is going to come from.
It's true.
So you said that there was one compound in particular that stood out. Yeah. PCO400 showed a lot of promise.
PCO400.
Yeah.
And why was that one so promising?
So it works by acting on something called ATP-sensitive potassium channels.
Okay.
Or KATP channels.
Well, I remember we talked about those before, right? They're like safety valves
Exactly.
for heart cells.
Yeah.
When the cell is stressed, they open up and let potassium flow out.
Right. That's exactly right. And that helps to protect the heart from damage.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this drug, PCO400, works on those channels.
Yeah. It works on the channels, and there's been some previous research that has shown that there might be a connection between those KATP channels and gap junction coupling.
I see. So maybe activating those channels can actually strengthen the gap junctions.
That's the idea.
So it's like a double whammy.
Yeah.
It's protecting the heart from stress and improving communication between the cells.
Exactly.
So did they test this PCO400 in like a more realistic system?
I did.
Something closer to an actual heart?
Yeah, they did. They actually moved from the cells in the dish to a mouse model of ACM.
A mouse model.
Yeah.
So these mice actually had ACM.
So these mice were genetically engineered to have a mutation that's similar to the one that you find in human patients.
So it's a really good model for studying the disease.
Yeah. It's a good model.
So what happened when they gave these mice PCO400?
The results were actually really encouraging.
Really? What happened?
They found that PCO400 significantly reduced the number of irregular heartbeats in the mice.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is. And it really suggests that this drug could potentially prevent those life-threatening arrhythmias that we see in ACM patients.
This is a huge breakthrough.
It's really exciting.
But I'm assuming there's still a lot of research to be done before this becomes like an actual treatment for people?
Of course. We need to be cautiously optimistic. We need to confirm the safety and efficacy of the drug in larger animal studies.
Right, of course.
And eventually in human trials.
So what are some of the key questions that still need to be answered?
Well, we need to figure out what the best dosage of the drug is.
Right.
And the best treatment regimens. And just as importantly, we need to understand the long-term effects.
Right. So is this a cure or is it just treating symptoms?
Exactly.
So there are a lot of things that future research needs to address.
Definitely.
This is really groundbreaking research. It's opened up a whole new way to potentially treat ACM.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you mentioned earlier that this robotic system could have implications for other diseases too. So what else could this technology help us to figure out?
I think the possibilities are endless, really.
Right.
Because gap junctions are involved in so many processes in the body.
Like what?
Well, from how our brains work to how our immune systems fight off infections.
Oh, wow.
I mean, this robot could be used to study the role of gap junctions in so many different diseases.
Wow.
And maybe even help us find new drugs for them.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
So this is just the beginning?
It feels like it.
It feels like we're entering a new era of medicine where robots and humans are working together
Right.
to try to, tackle these really challenging health problems.
Mm-hmm. It's a really exciting time to be in this field, I think.
Absolutely. So this deep dive has been amazing. We've learned so much about ACM and gap junctions and the role of robotics in medical research. It's really inspiring to see how human ingenuity and technology are coming together to pave the way for new treatments and hopefully cures for some of these really devastating diseases. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a step back for a moment and think about the broader implications of this technology.
Okay.
We'll be right back to wrap things up and explore the exciting future that lies ahead.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's amazing what they were able to see using those cells.
Yeah, it's incredible. So we're talking about kind of a paradigm shift here in terms of how we approach studying these kinds of conditions.
Yeah, I think so.
It's really remarkable. So you mentioned before that they tested a library of 76 different drugs on this ACM cell model.
Right.
What were they looking for with that?
Well, they were looking for any drugs that could potentially improve gap junction function.
So they were trying to see if they could reverse the effects
Why?
of that genetic mutation.
Yeah. They wanted to see if they could boost those connections between the cells.
And did they find anything?
They did. They found 5 compounds.
5. Wow, okay. So tell me about these compounds. What were they?
Well, some of them were already used for other things,
Okay.
which is really fascinating. Like,
Right.
for example, polarizamide is
Yeah.
used to treat type 2 diabetes.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah. And flecainide is used to treat arrhythmias.
Huh.
But what's interesting is that no one had ever really looked to see if these drugs had any effect on gap junctions before.
So this was a completely new discovery.
With a brand new discovery.
That's incredible. It
It's-
just
yeah.
goes to show you that sometimes the answers are right in front of us. We just need to be looking in the right place.
Exactly.
So out of these 5 compounds, was there one in particular that really stood out as being the most promising?
Yeah, PCO400.
PCO400.
It really showed the most promise.
Okay, why was that?
So PCO400 works by acting on those ATP-sensitive potassium channels that we were talking about before.
The KTP channels.
Yes, KTP channels, exactly.
Those are the safety valves, right?
Right.
That help protect the heart cells.
Exactly. So when a heart cell is stressed,
Uh-huh.
these channels open up,
Right.
and that helps to prevent damage.
And this drug targets those channels.
Yeah. And it turns out that there might be a connection between those KTP channels and gap junction coupling.
Really?
So activating those channels might actually strengthen the gap junction connections.
That's fascinating. So it's like a 2-for-1 deal.
Exactly.
You're protecting the heart cells from stress,
Right.
and you're also improving the communication between the cells.
Yeah, you got it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So did they test this PCO400 in anything other than, like, cells in a dish? Did they try it in, like, a more complex system?
They did. They actually moved on to a mouse model of ACM.
A mouse model?
Yeah.
So these mice actually had ACM.
They were genetically engineered to have a mutation that's similar to the ones found in human patients.
Well, it's a really good way to kind of mimic the human disease.
It is a good model for the human disease.
So what happened when they gave these mice the PCO400?
Well, the results were really encouraging.
What did they find?
So they found that the drug significantly reduced the number of irregular heartbeats in these mice.
Wow.
Yeah. So this suggests that the drug could potentially prevent those life-threatening arrhythmias that we see in ACM patients.
This is incredible. It sounds like a real game changer for people with this condition.
It's very promising.
But I'm guessing there are still a lot of hurdles to overcome before this drug could actually be used in humans.
Of course.
What are some of those challenges?
Well, we need to confirm these results in larger animal studies
Okay.
and then eventually in human clinical trials.
Right, because safety is always the top priority.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We need to make sure that the drug is safe and effective in people.
So what are the next steps in this research? What are the big questions that still need to be answered?
Well, we need to figure out the optimal dosages of the drug
Right.
and the best way to administer it. And we also need to understand its long-term effects.
Right.
Is it just treating the symptoms, or is it actually modifying the course of the disease?
So there's still a lot of work to be done,
It's
but this is a really promising start.
a very exciting development.
It is. So we've been talking about this incredible robotic system and the potential of PCO400
Yeah.
to treat ACM.
Right.
But this research has broader implications too, right?
Definitely.
What does this technology mean for the future of medical research as a whole?
Well, I think it highlights a really important trend in science,
Which is?
the convergence of different disciplines.
Okay.
We're seeing engineers and biologists working together, physicists collaborating with neuroscientists.
It's like a melting pot of ideas,
Exactly.
and that can only lead to good things.
Yeah, it can lead to some really exciting breakthroughs.
And this robotic system is a perfect example of that,
It is.
because it brought together robotics and microscopy and cell biology, and that's what allowed the researchers to make this leap forward in understanding and potentially treating ACM.
I agree. It's a great example of what can be achieved when people from different fields come together and collaborate.
So it's not just about the technology itself.
Right.
It's about the way that it brings people together
Absolutely.
and fosters this kind of interdisciplinary thinking.
It's all about breaking down those silos between different fields.
Yeah, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of this kind of interdisciplinary research in the future.
I think so too.
Oh,
It's a really exciting time to be in science.
It is.
Yeah.
So let's say everything goes smoothly with the PCO400 and it proves to be safe and effective in humans.
Okay.
How long could it realistically be before patients with ACM could actually benefit from this treatment?
Well, it's hard to say for sure.
Right, of course.
Because drug development is a long and complex process.
Yeah.
But it typically takes several years,
Okay.
sometimes even a decade or more,
Wow. Yeah.
to move from these early preclinical findings to an approved therapy.
So patience is key.
Patience is definitely key.
But for people who are affected by ACM,
Yeah,
this research offers a real glimmer of hope.
it does.
It shows that progress is being made.
Right.
And that even small scientific breakthroughs can eventually lead to treatments that can really change people's lives.
I think that's a really important point to make.
It is.
These things take time,
They do.
but the progress is happening.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Well, this has been an incredible journey into the world of cutting-edge science.
It has.
We started with these tiny connections between cells.
Right.
And we ended up exploring this vast potential of robotics in medicine.
Yeah.
It's really inspiring to see how human curiosity
Uh-huh.
and ingenuity can drive such remarkable advances.
It's amazing what we can accomplish when we put our minds to it.
It really is. So thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners,
Yes.
until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those big questions. So we've been talking about this amazing robotic system and how it's being used to study ACM.
Yeah. It's really groundbreaking stuff.
It is.
Oh.
But I'm wondering about the bigger picture here.
Okay.
What does this technology mean for the future of medical research?
Well, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, if we can use robots to study gap junctions in the heart,
Uh-huh.
why not use them to study other types of cells?
Right, like in the brain or
Exact.
the immune system.
Exactly. So many possibilities.
It's pretty mind-blowing to think about all the potential applications.
It is.
But let's not get too carried away here.
Okay.
This research is still in its early stages.
Right.
What would you say are the most important next steps to actually translate these findings into real-world treatments?
Well, first and foremost, we need to confirm these results in larger animal studies and then eventually in human clinical trials.
Right, because safety is paramount.
Absolutely.
Right.
We need to make sure that this drug is safe and effective for people.
So let's say everything goes smoothly and PCO400 proves to be safe and effective. How long could it realistically be before patients with ACM could actually benefit from this treatment?
Well, drug development is a long and complicated process. It can take years,
Okay.
sometimes even a decade or more,
Wow.
to go from these initial findings to an approved therapy.
So patience is key.
Patience is definitely key.
But for people who are affected by ACM, this research offers a real glimmer of hope,
It does. It shows that progress is being made.
and that even small scientific breakthroughs can eventually lead to treatments that can really change people's lives.
Absolutely. And for anyone who wants to learn more about this research,
Yeah.
we've included a link to the full article in the show notes.
Awesome.
It's really fascinating stuff.
It is. This has been an incredible journey into the world of cutting-edge science.
It had,
We started with these tiny connections between cells,
right?
and we ended up exploring the vast potential of robotics in medicine.
It's amazing what we can accomplish when we combine human ingenuity with technological innovation.
It really is. It's inspiring to see how these things are coming together to pave the way for new treatments and hopefully cures for some of these really devastating diseases.
I agree. It's a very exciting time to be in this field.
It is. So thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those big questions.